Before we get going, I just want to give a little bit on EdgeWork before we start. What is EdgeWork soft skill system? Typically, our clients are in STEM and or very highly analytical professionals. And what we do is that we help them, if their knowledge is here, sometimes their delivery is here, we figure out what that gap is in the people skills, in the soft skills, so they can connect their message that goes beyond the data. Sometimes the data is not enough and we have to give meaning to that data because it's the people that we trust more than the information many times. So that's the background on the EdgeWork soft skills. I've been doing this for over 3 decades, starting with an acting technique, and then I bridged it into a executive coaching technique. And it's really about training how not to act, but how to take away the blocks that come up that make us act. And when that happens, that's never good. We're always divorcing ourselves from our audience. So that's what the work is from the standpoint of EdgeWork. And I welcome everyone. Let me introduce Liana Jo Ault. She's a Venture General Manager, Energy Innovation at Nokia. Liana is an innovation technology evangelist and thought leader who challenges the status quo by asking, what if? With a demonstrated history of leading transformation projects in multiple industries, including telecommunication carrier networks, regulated power utilities, and the public sector. Quote, I specialize in expanding strategic vision for customers, stakeholders around the application of new technologies to existing challenges, unquote. Liana likes to focus on customer needs and believes collaboration and communication are key to finding the right balance of technology, process, and people skills. Quote, I believe diversity at the table creates the best solution and appreciate challenging and respectful feedback from all stakeholders, unquote. Now, I'm going to tell you just a few words from me about Liana. I've known Liana for a couple of years now. We've worked together. She's been working with me on some of her communications, on some of her presentations, but we've turned into more than that. We've turned into colleagues. And we have so much respect for each other. And what I love about Liana, besides that she's brilliant and she's smart, is her person, just who she is, her sense of caring, her sense of doing right. And these are the things that always attract me beyond the brilliance, beyond the actual degrees and the knowledge. And the other thing I really get jazzed about with Liana is she's on fire about this stuff. She is an evangelist. You are. You're on.
Very enthusiastic. Yes.
Yeah. I listen now. I have to admit, sometimes she gets me, and a lot of it kind of goes over my head, because I'm not technical, right? So I'm like, wow, that's great. But what I learn at the end of it all is that I want more. I want to know more. I want to learn more. I want to engage more. So I just have to say that is that. And onto that, let's give a cyber clap for our guest, Liana.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, it is interesting. We think about the journey of the last 2 years. Kathy introduced you to me, and that was a really awesome introduction, and even to the point now where you've helped my daughter. So my daughter is actually a psychology major, and she had to present at her first webinar. I guess it was really actually a seminar. She was actually presenting in person, and she was a nervous wreck. And so Anthony worked. Yeah, she appreciated your work, and she really used some of the skills that you taught her in order to kind of overcome some of the fear she had about approaching people and people coming up to her and what do I talk about, and she was really uncomfortable. So she really just glided through that very well. So I appreciate that very much.
You're welcome. By the way, I understand she crushed it.
She did. She really crushed it. That's a little bit of a mom thing there, but yeah, I was a proud mom moment there. So
no, she told me. She's like, I crushed it.
Well, I think that goes back to really having confidence. And I think that that's something that we talk about a lot, is having confidence in communication. Doesn't mean you have to know everything, but being confident in what you are talking about. And I wouldn't say fake it till you make it necessarily, but I've never been shied away from saying, if I don't know the answer, I know where to go. And so for me, there was never has been anything wrong with saying, you know what, I don't know the answer, but I'll get back to you on that, and then following through. Because I'm not an engineer in a professional engineering position. I am a technical person. And so it's been sometimes a challenge to talk to technical people or engineering type people who may see me as not on the same level. But I feel that one of my strengths has been able to bridge that between the business side and the very, very technical side, which is really what I'm doing right now with my venture incubator group, and really helping to take extremely technical information around mathematical modeling and energy markets and financial things, and being able to explain that down to what that bottom line impact is for our customer.
What do you contribute your ability to persuade your audience that's beyond the data? Beyond the data.
So I think it's data. I'm going to say data just because that's what I normally say, but I think it's really important to have data backing you up. I think it's important to have some sort of truth behind what you say, but it's really around the emotional impact that you can make on that person with that data. So for example, if I have well, to your point, I get excited about what I'm talking about, so that enthusiasm comes through, because I know that what I'm speaking about, I want to share with someone, I know it will make a difference for them. So understanding that I have something to offer you that I know will make your life easier, that I know will impact you from a business, a financial impact, or I know that I have something that will impact you and make your life better. So however that connection, I can make that connection with someone, I think really helps with the idea of persuasion. And that could be persuading them to look at a new solution, to transform on a project. It could be persuading them that I am the best person for the job. And I think that's something we forget, is most conversations we have in business, there is some layer of persuasion. Even if we are presenting facts, there's a reason behind why we're presenting what we're presenting, and really identifying what that reason is and who the audience is and how that connects is, I think, really, really key.
You seem to have the personality, at least with me, that I was unguarded with you like this. It was right when we met. I'm like, wow. And there are some people that you're trying to figure out. And as you try to figure them out, you kind of wonder what layers you could be on, how many layers you could unguard, right? With you, I'm like, oh, hi. We're like, it's like that. I'm going to make an assumption that you have that effect on not just myself, but a lot of people.
I think I do. I think it's because I tend to be very open and very sharing. I genuinely care about other people. I think my daughter would say I'm probably too trusting to begin with, and that's changed a little bit over the years. But for me, it's really about connecting on that personal level. I love to meet people. I'm not really an insane introvert. I'm not an insane extrovert either. I like that balance between being alone and being around people. But those people I am around, I genuinely care about them. I care about what's happening in their life. I care about them professionally and personally. And I think that's a good sign to have that emotional connection to them. It can cause, you can open yourself up for disappointment at times, I think, by doing that. But I'd rather be that genuine, engaged person with someone than not be. Sometimes it comes across too strongly. I think people can be turned off by that openness. And they really start thinking, are you really, what is your angle here? What is your motive? But I don't really have that. When I honestly meet someone for the first time, it's just getting to know them. I really want to get to know them. When I started traveling globally, I was looking at a trip to Asia Pacific, and I'm not familiar with that culture at all. And one of the things that I was reading about was with the Japanese culture is that they'll ask what seems to be very impersonal and invasive questions. And some people are taken aback by that in the West, that they're asking such personal questions on a first meeting. But what they're doing is trying to find that common ground. And I find that I do that as well. I try to open up personally, even to find something in common that I can share with that person so we understand each other on that personal level better. Because I think that that little bit of personal attention even helps with professional relationships.
Did you have to make any adjustments from your communication style from Europe versus the States, or now, I mean, Asia versus the States and so on?
I absolutely have. And in Europe, I've been working, of course, I've moved here about 18 months ago. And I had been working over here about 75% of the time for the 2 years before that. So I had spent a lot of time here. And I, as everybody can tell, I tend to talk fast. I get excited. And so then I speed up. And so Jeff's laughing because he's heard me so many times, and Kathy has too, I'm sure. And so I really had to learn to slow down. I learned that we as Americans use a lot more slang than I ever thought about. We have a lot of euphemisms in our day-to-day language. One of the things I noticed was I had a colleague in St. Louis say, we're going to circle the wagons. And I know what that means. Everybody knows what that means. But you come to Europe and that they have no idea what that phrase would even, how it would apply to the conversation. And so I really had to slow down. Definitely. I've had to think very judiciously about my syntax, my words, my phrases, to make sure that I'm actually speaking and using words that they'll know the words, but to frame it in a way that my intent is understood. Because there's words that we use, like the word operations. Okay, that's a power utility word. We know what operations means. But when I'm talking to someone in the energy market space, that means something very different than what it means for field operations and what that means to operate an asset. And so the team I'm in now, we actually represent 15 countries. We're mostly centered in Europe. We have one that's in the US, but we represent so many different cultures that we spend a lot of time just getting to know, what did you mean by this? And it really makes us take a step back and not jump to conclusions or assumptions, but ask for more clarifying questions to understand really, what do you mean by this? And it's been amazing. It's been an amazing experience to really have to stop and think about the words I use. Enunciating is something else. I'm from the Midwest, from Illinois, and we like to turn our T's into D's when we say city and 40, and we don't think anything about that as Americans, but that confuses people who are who maybe are not native speakers of English. So it's fun. It's really interesting that, I think between really slowing down and really choosing my language, and also changing some of my approach, I've noticed that me being very, very open is not typically something you see in British culture. So I've gone into meetings and people are a little uncomfortable when I tend to be just really informal and open and friendly in those meetings. I'm starting to see that they lighten up very quickly, but traditionally I think that's been kept for the business that happens in the pub after the business meeting. So that's been interesting as well.
If you don't mind, I want to piggyback on that for a moment. People always say, how do you get someone to be unguarded? And then there's this list of things to say and do. Really, that it doesn't mean anything if you're guarded yourself, right? And that's Liana's gift, is that she comes to the table unguarded, right? And you come to the table. I'm just curious, in the UK, being like that, are there any mixed messages that they get that you have to make adjustments for? Do they think that you just really want to party? Do they think that is there something else they're getting that you got to go, whoa, I didn't know I was communicating that?
I haven't had that problem yet. What I do notice is that I transition. So before the meeting starts, we'll have those few minutes and it'll be really loose and I'll be, pretty laid back and getting to know people, asking a few questions, really engaging eye contact, facial expression, smiling, nodding my head, really paying attention, that body language that's so very important to try to help them feel at ease. Very important for me to make sure that I recognize and remember people's names. I'm not as good as I used to be. Age does that. But especially the women that I speak with, I really want to make sure that I support them, that I give them the table. But then when it's time to present, I kind of turn that off a little bit and then get into that more professional mode. My kids call it teacher voice. I get a teacher voice, and that's when I'm that professional then. And then I can turn it back off when that's done, and my piece is done, and we can go back into informal mode.
So Liana, I'm curious from a standpoint of changing cultures, and I mean, many of you know that I do a podcast on women in STEM. And you were talking about the communication issue and the difference in cultures. Do you see a difference culturally from what you need to do communication-wise in other cultures being female than you did in the U.S. from being in the U.S.?
Yes, I'm going to say yes. I would say that when I was in the Middle East, that was eye-opening. The first time I went, I was there and had no idea what to expect. And when you read up, you're kind of worried about what am I going to run into. I was always treated with a great amount of respect, but because of their culture, oftentimes it would be nothing more than a nod from a gentleman, and then that would be it. They would be talking to the other men, and I would be listening, because that was the expectation. It wasn't necessarily, it was actually a sign of respect, not that they were dismissing me. And so when I learned that, and I could engage with them knowing that they were not going to necessarily give me direct eye contact, it was fine. But it is a little bit interesting when you deal with that. Nowadays, it's so much more open there, especially in Saudi Arabia. But I've had also men that, because they were married, it was not a problem for them to shake my hand, and they were very warm and very welcoming to me. Please have a seat. They'd get me something to drink. They would make sure that I had whatever facilities I needed. So I try to be very gracious in those situations and be very grateful. So just kind of cognizant, I guess, of what's around me. So that's really the only time I've really seen a big change here. Go ahead, Kathy.
Well, I was just going to say, like, from a standpoint of, like, you talk about your openness, which I have always loved. I mean, that's like one of the things that drew me to you when we first met, was your openness, and like, I feel like we became instant friends probably the first time we talked. Is that perceived differently in other cultures?
I haven't had that problem yet necessarily. Okay. I think some people are a little standoffish until they until they just get used to it, I guess, because I don't really try to change for people, but I'm just very aware of my surroundings. If this is not something that someone else is doing, I try really hard not to force myself on anyone. But yeah, I'm just kind of authentic about that way. So eventually I feel that they warm up very quickly, and I've not been treated as I'm some loud, brash American, although sometimes I wonder if that's something that's going to happen. So I do try to keep that a little bit toned down and maybe not be my full authentic self that I would be with my daughter or with you, Kathy, behind closed doors. But for the most part, I've not really had too much of an issue with, even here, like in the UK, it's a little bit different than what it would be in the Middle East versus what I see in Finland. The Finnish people are great. I really enjoy working with them, but they are a hard read. When I've presented to them, and I hope I'm not offending anyone talking about cultures, but it's just observation I've made, that when they're very stoic, so they don't always express a great deal of emotion, especially if you're meeting them for the first time. So I never know when I talk to them, how did that go over? Was that good? Was that bad? I didn't get a good read. And I'm always constantly trying to read the room and see how it's being interpreted, which is why I love that we keep our cameras on so I can see people's faces. But that has been more interesting, I think. So even when I'm myself, I'm thinking, wow, did that go over well? Did that not go over well? And what I found the first time, I was like, I don't know how that went. And I talked to the salesperson I was working with. They're like, oh yeah, you nailed it. It was great. They loved it. I'm like, well, that's good, because I had no idea.
Jeff, 100% positive from intent goes a long way. And you're totally on mark. And it's interesting, I just want to talk about Liana and that statement. It's everyone nods yes to that. Everyone nods yes to what Jeff just wrote, but it's really hard to live that all the time. And I think this is part, in my opinion, it's a big part of Liana's success, is that it's something she lives. I have a question here from Mike. Liana, have you ever had to promote something, a product, an idea, etc., that you did not believe in? If so, how did that go? Good, great question, Mike.
That's a really great question. And I'm trying to think, probably no, Mike. If I think back, I don't like, I mean, my integrity is really important to me, especially when I'm working with potential customers. I want to be that trusted source. And since I was not a salesperson, but I was in business development, I never spoke price to people. I didn't want to know pricing. That's Jeff's job. But that was one of those things where I wanted to be that honest, almost consultant to my customers, and they could trust my opinion on something. I would never try to bash something. If we had a suite of products that we were looking at, I would never try to say, don't do that because that's terrible. I would try to steer it towards the more positive of a conversation, what the impact is. So even if I didn't believe in a product like completely, I don't know that if I didn't believe in it, I don't think I could sell it or promote it. But there's normally a way that I can spin it that's a positive. So if it's something that I think there is something positive out of that could be beneficial to people, then I can find that angle. But for the most part, no, I don't think I've ever really engaged in anything where I'm like, I have to sell it and I don't believe in it. Because I just won't do it. I'll find a new solution rather than try to sell something that doesn't work.
Yeah, I couldn't fathom watching you, just looking at you selling something you didn't believe in.
No, it would be written all over my face. And that's one thing that I've had to work a lot on. Is maintaining that facial, like that neutral face that I don't, my expressions are quite emotional and emotive. And so my expressions would be read. So when we first went to Zoom meetings, I kept my camera off a lot until I learned to think, and remember that my camera's on, so I'm not eye rolling and shaking my head about something stupid. But that's something I think having kids that are teenagers and now young adults, I guess I should say adults, my son is married now, but they would call me out on that. Do not, Mom, why are you shaking your head? So, it's something that I've just learned that even though I'm not thinking anything horrible, if that body language, again, is so very important, because I think it's what 70% of our communication is nonverbal. And so I really think that us as professionals, the openness that we talk about is in our body language. It's leaning forward, it's leaning into the conversation. It's eye contact and smiles and nods, to make sure that they know that we're listening.
Yes, and from an authentic place too.
Yeah.
From a place of real true engagement. As I'm looking at Eve, Mike, Kathy, Lynette, I'm seeing her, and I know quite a few of you for a long time. And what I love about this group is that everyone here is pretty transparent. It is what it is, what it is, what it is, what it is, and that's a beautiful thing, because that when you work from a place of truth like that, then you could get somewhere. But if everyone is not conveying, covering up. So this is great, Liana. Yeah.
Something else I was going to bring out is we did this training at Nokia several months ago with the women that was about being politically savvy. It was based on a book, and it was trying to help us really grow into ourselves as leaders and to understand business politics and political situations. And what I found as I had to rate myself was I tended to be very under political. So that transparency you talk about, I am who I am. And I speak my mind and I try to do it respectfully, but I'm very transparent that way, which is, I think engaging, but that's where it can also be problematic if you do work in a very political situation. So I don't like to deal with politics, but it's a fact of business. And what I finally have learned, and what I try to when I mentor other young women, it's learning to navigate those politics, but not participate. And that's something I think that's really key to maintaining our authenticity, is learning to be open, to be honest in a respectful way, and to navigate our way through those situations without having to participate in them.
Let's hear about your approach. If it's different between speaking when you are more in, I guess, in an engineer role of technology compared to sales. How did that shift for you?
Yeah, there was probably a big shift there because again, I don't do true sales. Well, I do now with the new role, but I really do. I was doing a lot of business development, and so I think that when I was just an engineer, I'm not saying just an engineer. When I was in the technical role, my conversation, my audience was a very different audience. Really, it was more internal. There was some internal sales to it, but not as much. And I think what I did was gave a lot of detail. It was really a step by step when I was talking to the NOC or I was talking to a field operations group. It was very much a detailed step by step. This is why I got where I got. And now what I found was, and it was really about the technology. It was really about teaching them about technology, teaching them how to do something that was technical. I would be giving results and KPIs of projects that we were doing and reporting out just numbers. And it was a very black and white. Did we make our margins? Did we not? Did we make our timeline? Did we not? Did we have any outages? How did it go? So it was very just black and white. And I find that going into the sales arena, there's a lot more gray. I really talk now, it's much more emotive in my mind. It's much more about how do they feel about the product? How do they perceive the company? How do they perceive the value that we proposed in this? And really trying to help them understand we have the answer to their challenge, understanding their challenge and then answer to that. I think with sales, I've had to change and listen a lot more than I did before. I think it's when it's something technical, I'm the expert. I'm giving you what you need to know. And even if I'm still the expert right now, it's kind of leading the customer along, listening to what their challenge is, listening to what they have to say, and then saying, okay, I understand where you are. Let's talk about how we can get to this next, overcome that hurdle, how we get to the next step. And I think people in general, when you're persuading them, they like someone standing shoulder to shoulder with them and not just dictating, but going on that journey with them to lead them to that aha moment. And I think that's really, really a big difference, I think.
Wow.
I would say that there is usually a level of persuasion, and Anthony, you and I talked about this in preparation. There is usually a level of persuasion, no matter what you do. There's some level of persuasion in your conversations.
Yes. You said the magic word, and again, it's one of those that everyone nods yes to, but very difficult many times to actually do, especially in sales, which is listening, just to be still. I see Eve, she's nodding up and down. She's in sales. Eve, do you want to chime in on that?
I would say 80% of it is listening and finding out what the customer needs, and then working with them, guiding them to tell you the solution. But you don't have to persuade them if you're working with them correctly, like Liana's talking about. They usually know what they need, and then it's your job to get it to them, But it's all about communicating. How can we help you? That's always how I've done it. It's how can I help you?
Yeah, thank
And
you.
really caring about who that customer is and what their needs are.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. I have my phone under Jeff Grosshauser and I have my face on my computer. So it's a double whammy. So you're welcome, everyone.
We got double we got double the treat. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's one way to look at it. Liana, I would not sell yourself short when you're speaking with technical people that you're actually selling, right? You're selling the outcome that happened. You're influencing the outcome that happened. So in your process, without overburdening, right? You're still selling, and then when you came to Nokia, any customer interaction, we're always trying to figure out what that ultimate outcome is for that customer, and I think successful people do that in a non-selling platform. Even though I've had that salesperson for my whole career, you can't really sell anything because um, the people that we work with are really smart, and they'll see through anything, right? They're really smart. But as Greg notes, is if you can position the solution to meet those needs, that's the positive. And if you can get the people on your team to be able to do that as well in a non-selling situation, that's really the win, because then it becomes the customer speaking, not necessarily us speaking, trying to sell something.
I think you're right. I think some of the most successful workshops we've ever had were really not us dictating to customers. It was really everybody at the table talking about and trying to solve a problem together. And that seems to always work really well. Again, that shoulder to shoulder, and Eve, you talked about it. It's not us saying this is what you need and pushing it down their throats. It's leading them to that conclusion and really feeling like they have a partner and not a customer supplier relationship, but they have a partner at the table.
Let's talk about rejection. And
I hate rejection. Do we have to talk about rejection?
what a beautiful ending note, everyone. Let's talk about rejection. I want everyone to leave this whole roundtable really feeling, in this uplifted way. Let's talk about the worst moments of our lives, okay?
Leave the roundtable feeling rejected.
Yeah. Right, leaving the roundtable feeling rejected personally and professionally, all right? Let's talk about it just for a moment, and we will end on a better note than that, though. You're a seasoned professional. You've been around a while. So you've been rejected a lot, right? I mean, as long as we've been around and we're in business, we're going to get rejected. It's just part of what it is. How did you deal with rejection early on, and has it shifted and changed to how you deal with it today?
So I don't handle rejection well. I'm going to just say that out front. And then I think that's part of being a very open person, is I tend to take that at a personal level. And that's something I struggle with, is keeping things that are out here. I had a girlfriend that said, keep it out here, take it out here. Sorry, I'm putting my hand up, but that's really about taking it out here and not internalizing that rejection. I think that's an art form in itself. So I still struggle with that, especially because I think I do care so much about my customers. That is always going to be a problem with me, or for me, is making sure that I keep that emotion in check. Normally, I think what I do is I think number one is the assume innocence. This is something I've learned at Ameren, is I always try to assume innocence. Maybe it's not, first of all, it's not me. Most likely it's not me. It's either it's not the right product, not the right solution, it's not the right time. There may be something going on right now for them on a personal level that means that they're not open to new ideas right now. If it's something that I'm trying to sell my idea and I know deep down, I know this is the right thing, then I will try another angle. I will go back to the drawing board and I'll say, I'll listen. First of all, I think as Eve pointed out, maybe I didn't hear properly. So then I'll ask clarifying questions to understand better what I missed. And I've noticed that I have to do that a lot more, I think, now in Europe, because again, sometimes the language, even though we're speaking the same English language, there's a barrier to the understanding because of some nuances. I mean, even here in the UK, the words that they use and what things mean, I won't go into it, but there's terms that they use. I'm thinking, okay, that is not what that means in the US. And so trying to understand and ask for those clarifying questions to make sure I understand. And then I really try to, again, reframe whatever it is that I'm trying to persuade, and to make sure that it does hit all the marks, or I'll switch directions completely. If it's an adamant, no, this is not the right, no, then I'm like, you know what, I understand, appreciate, the fact that you've given me the time. And then I move on and I just kind of wipe the dust from my feet and do that. Because a lot of times I might keep it in the back of my mind and I'll check in with them, maybe on a personal level, or maybe I'll connect with them on something else that they're doing and not try to sell something, but just to show still, again, I do care about that person. I care about what they're going through or whatever. So that's kind of, I guess, how I handle some objections, rejections. It really does, though, depend on the level of relationship I have with the person, how I overcome that objection or rejection.
When you feel it personally, tell me about, like, Where does that go? Where do you feel it? Then what do you do with that?
Yeah. Normally I kind of withdraw. I get very introspective if something has not gone well or I've hit some real objections. I really mull it over my head. I don't normally sleep the night after something like that happens because I don't let it go. I will really mull it over my head to figure out what could I have done differently? Where did that go wrong? What was, what really were my, and I'll question, what were my motives? What did I have, did I come across as genuine and honest in this, or was there something that I could have done differently? I also, and this is kind of related, but if I've really screwed something up, I will absolutely take accountability for it with my team, with my kids, with my personal relationships. I absolutely own up to it because I think that repairs that relationship if it's damaged in some way faster than anything else. And I've done that with customers. Said, I am really, really sorry that this is not the intention. This is not what was the intended outcome. Let's see how we can fix this. Let's see how we can repair. What else can we do to make this different? So, yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's a very personal, deep thing for me. And I have this mindset that I'm a perfectionist. And I expect a great deal out of myself, probably more so than anyone else. And so I do tend to be very reflective about those things and find new ways that I can do things better.
Do you go to a knee-jerk reaction that it was your fault kind of thing? You don't do that. Good.
No, I really don't. I really try to kind of do root cause analysis for those people who have done troubleshooting in the field and know what I'm more technical. The root cause analysis, really what is behind this. Again, when I was at the power utility, we learned to assume innocence first, to assume that there's something else going on, that it's not really that person's fault, it's not really your fault. So trying to look at maybe it's just not the right time, maybe just try to find and think and mull over my head all these different scenarios that it could have been and narrow them down one by one till I finally think, okay, this is how I could have handled this better. So I don't really go to that knee jerk that it's something that I did, but I always feel like even for those things, when you think about control and you think about influence, and this is probably from another set of training that I've done, you have this circle of control that you think is really, really small. But when you start really thinking about it, your circle of influence is quite large. There are things that you can influence the outcome of, even if you can't control those outcomes. There's like, well, wait a minute, you actually have more influence over that scenario than you realize. And so I really try to think about how could I influence the outcome instead of control it, because I do tend to be a control freak.
Well, I actually have a question for the group, because in talking about rejection and Liana's comment about internalizing, I internalize everything. And I think it's really, really hard. I'm curious from those, especially those who have been in like sales roles for a long time, how do you get over internalizing things and being able to put it off at a distance and not bring it inside? Because I have a horrible time with that. So I'm just curious if anyone else has any perspectives and advice.
All too often, we frame everything in a win-lose. We look at our interactions in business, our interpersonal interactions, we look at them in a very binary manner. And, in today's digital age, computing age, everything, we are even more focused in binary thinking, and binary thinking is a problem because there's a continuum between winning. I mean, this is not the everybody wins mentality. Don't get me wrong there. But everything is not a win or lose. I get my way, and when you think different, one of us wins and one of us loses. We've got to once I got out of some of that binary thinking of, well, it's me or you, one of us is right and one of us is wrong. And when you start communicating to understand each other and where each other are, we can be at different places, and quite frankly, neither one of us is completely right and neither one of us is completely wrong. And so often in the internalization is kind of self-rejection. And we can get away from the binary thought process and defining it as if we didn't win, we must have lost, so therefore I'm rejected. That's kind of what I wanted to add, or a few more words around what I typed.
Lee, thank you. Thank you very much. That was great. Wonderful. I appreciate it. Kathy, go back to your question again. I think Lee touched on that, but I want to ask yours again, please.
Yeah, and maybe I'll reframe it a little bit differently. So I think most of you know I changed positions a couple of years ago. I went into a consulting space, and I did a client delivery that went really badly. And I beat myself. I felt like shit about it for probably like a good 2 weeks. But those of you who have been through this, how do you not internalize it? Like, how do you keep it so that it doesn't affect you, so that you're not sleeping? Because I don't think I slept for 2 weeks. I go to a therapist. I'm very open about this. I talked to my therapist about it. She's like, you don't know what that person has, what's happened to them. And so that was like a very interesting way of like reframing it, of like, you don't know what's going on with them. It could have nothing to do with you. And I'm just curious. I mean, like Jeff, you've given me 1,000 presentations probably over our time together. For those of you that are in those roles, how do you take that personal side away and make it something that is like, I can sleep, I'm okay, like I'm gonna keep going,
Yeah.
like this is not that big of a deal?
Yeah,
Because I think it's hard.
yeah, I can answer, Kathy. It's just trying to think of an analogy. Is that in that sales role, right? As the account manager, director, whatever sales role that is, you're the tip of the spear, but you have a team behind you, right? And I've never been a single employee entrepreneur. I've never done anything on my own, right? I've always had this team behind us, and in the solutions that I'm representing behind me. So it's collaborative, right? So I've never won personally. I've won as a team, and I've never lost personally. I've lost as a team. And you need to go back, and if you didn't win something, because ultimately there is a win or a loss, you move forward or you don't. You look at, hey, what could we have done better as a team? What I could have done better as a leader to get the team better positioned. You have to take some of the responsibility, but you don't have to take it all to the point where you're not sleeping, because you're not a single employee company, right? You have all this company behind you that supports you, and you need to take your role in that as setting that team up correctly. But it wasn't against you personally, right? It was against what you were representing, and it just didn't go well in that time. And how do you reposition to do better the next time?
Kathy, one thing I was going to say is that it may not go, I don't think it probably went as bad as you thought. It went, because in our minds, we're thinking all of these, I don't know, these negative self-talk things that are happening. A lot of times, sometimes it's just not under your control. And then you have to just let that go. I mean, I've had times where I've lost some big clients. Like Jess said, go back and assess what you could have done differently, what you could have done better. But then there's just some things that aren't under your control, and learn from that and keep moving forward, because there's other fish to fry is how I look at it. But I get the whole beating myself up, but a lot of this has nothing to do with you. Take responsibility for what you did, what you could do better, and then move on. Because you can't beat yourself forever about that. It's just that, Kathy, that's too long.
Does it take a while to get used to it, or did you, those of you who are in like more sales roles, like were you just like automatically there?
No, it took me a while. Absolutely, it took me a while.
Okay.
I've been in sales for like, oh God, 20 years. So you're right, it took a while. And you said you're new to this? Yeah, okay. You're a newbie.
To keep my promise of ending on time, I'm gonna come to the end. I'm just gonna give my 2 cents. As host, I'm not facilitating, but I'll just say one thing about the rejection. If it's first, I think for me anyway, and I try to train on this, there's 2 parts of it, psychological and emotional. Psychologically, you have to know that if you're successful, that means you're going to be rejected X amount of times. Kind of like in sales, if you're going to go out for 100 calls, you will be rejected X amount of times. Now, it's easily to get that intellectually, but emotionally to own that as well is where the fight comes, is where the learning comes. Anyone could just say, go, yeah, that's right. But then you get rejected and you go, oh, yeah, you know. So it's that kind of journey. So I see it as a journey. Are you able to own the rejection and learn? Because if you could learn from it, it's not, the rejection is not a failure. It's part of what you need to do to succeed. And even regardless if it was your fault or not, it's on a whole other level. It is 3 minutes to the hour. Everyone, I want to thank everyone, Lee, Jeff, everyone that contributed, you guys, all of you, Eve, Kathy, you were great. And I want to give a real cyber thank you to Liana. Thank you, Liana. Thank you so much.